From game of the generation to game of the year to just game. The Video Game Awards is in December. We're a few weeks away, and the Game of the Year nominees have been announced. And we're going to talk about whether or not we feel Starfield was snubbed. Like I said at the beginning of this video, Starfield was once deemed possibility of it being the game of the generation, and then definitely being a Game of the Year candidate, to now it's just a game that released. A very good game. Let's not get it twisted. Let's not get it twisted. A very good game that released in 2023. Now, we're going to go through the list of games that were nominated, and we're going to talk about whether or not certain games shouldn't be in here. Whether or not there are other games that were snubbed, because let's keep it a buck 50, buck 75. Okay, there were a lot of good games that came out this year, right? I think no matter how this thing would have laid out, there would have been someone either upset or feeling like their personal game of the year was snubbed. But it ain't about your personal game of the year. I seen a shout out to Erica who tweeted out, she don't like the fake positivity. It says, as long as the game that you love it ain't about your personal game of the year. Even though you can have that. Everyone has a right to their opinion. Everybody has it yesterday, right? We're going to go through the list, right? We're going to start with Alan Wake 2. Alan Wake 2 snuck in. It barely hit the qualifications for being able to be qualified as a Game of the Year nominee because it released. It has like a 90, 91 score on Metacritic, which is really high. But a lot of people were bored with this game. I haven't played it yet myself, so I can't give you a personal opinion on it, but I've seen a lot of Discord of people saying, hey, this game, it looks great. It just takes a very long time to get into. I don't feel like this game had the cultural impact of a game that you will say, hey, this was a game of the year, right? So even though it's nominated, I don't think there's a chance, especially with these other games, that Alan Wake 2 wins, okay? Baldur's Gate 3, cultural phenomenon, okay? We knew this was going to be on here. This was going to happen no matter what. Okay. This was the one game that every game released this year, you could chalk it up and say it's a dub. It's in there. You could have bet your mortgage on it. It was going to be there. It was going to be there. Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man is one of the biggest IPs in the world. Spider-Man 2 is a fantastic freaking game. I think this is not as much as Baldur's Gate 3 because we know Spider-Man 2 did have its faults. A lot of people were not happy with the Venom missions. People weren't happy with the bugs that the game had, but it was still a great game. I think this is almost a no-brainer. Resident Evil 4. Remakes should not be Game of the Year contenders. I'm sorry. Game of the Year contenders need to be new IPs or sequels. I don't care. Oh, well, they did this to the game. I don't care. It's not a new story. It's not a new adventure. It's a remake of the same game. I don't think remakes, especially I don't think remasters have ever been inside the category, but remakes I don't think should be there. So that right there could have been a spot left over for some games that we're going to talk about, okay? Super Mario Bros. Wonder, fantastic freaking game. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, fantastic freaking game. I think when it comes to almost guaranteed locks for this year's Game of the Year award, you could have put Baldur's Gate 3, Spider-Man 2, and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, right? Guaranteed locks, all right? And in my opinion, these are going to be there. But I don't think Resident Evil 4 should be here. And I think there's a couple of games here that got snubbed, and we're going to talk about the main one part of the video here in a second. But we got Final Fantasy 16 had a more of a right to be here than Resident Evil 4. Okay, Hogwarts Legacy, to me, has a more of a right to be here than Resident Evil 4. Hi-Fi Rush, to me, deserves to be here more than Resident Evil 4. Right? I'm not saying Resident Evil 4 is a lesser game than there. I'm saying those games are better than Resident Evil 4. I'm saying when it comes to remakes, it shouldn't be there. Last but not least, Starfield. Starfield has more of a right to be in the spot where Resident Evil 4 is than Resident Evil 4, and probably more than the other games, okay? When you look at Game of the Year, yes, I know some people go to Metacritic, and Metacritic, for a lot of people, determines whether or not a game is Game of the Year material, but to me, when it's a cultural phenomenon, people still to this day, right, are still talking about whether or not they love or hate Starfield, whether or not it's a good game, it's a bad game, right? And Starfield it's still in its infancy. It's going to be played relentlessly over the next 10 years, i.e. Skyrim's going to have a massive amount of updates, massive amount of content. Starfield was played by over 10 million players. We're talking between game sales and Game Pass, right? 10 million. And if you guys remember when it was in early access, how many people were playing on Steam? It was tops, right, on Steam. And those people actually had to go out and buy the game, right? You had to buy the game, right? Now, we're not talking about whether or not Starfield is a good or bad game. Was it snubbed? It's twofold. I could give it a case, both cases. Number one, yes, because Resident Evil 4 should not be there. If you took Resident Evil 4 and you would have gave me Hogwarts, I wouldn't have complained. You could have put Final Fantasy 16. Then we can have a debate whether it's Starfield over those games. I think Starfield was snubbed because I believe a game like Hogwarts Legacy was snubbed. I believe Starfield was snubbed because a game like Final Fantasy 16 was snubbed. I think Starfield was snubbed because I think a game like Hi-Fi Rush was snubbed because I don't believe Resident Evil 4 should be there. And I know for some people, Resi 4 is their greatest game of all time. They can play it a million times and never be bored with it. But Resi 4 should have been up for a Game of the Year nomination when Resi 4 first came out. That's the only time that game should have been nominated for Game of the Year. And I get it. This is just my opinion. I reserve the right to be wrong. You can tell me I'm a dumbass if you want to. But in my opinion, Resident Evil 4 should not be there. You could put any other game in that slot. So to me, there's more than just Starfield. There's a multitude of games being snubbed. I do think Starfield was the most polarizing. Whether it was going to be the hype and anticipation leading up to the Game of the Year nominees being announced was because of Starfield, right? I think the tweet that went out from Jeff Keighley about, hey, I don't pick the games, 120 different writers that picked the game. I think that was all. He knew Starfield wasn't going to be there, and he knew there would be some hate behind it. If you look at the fanboys, fangirls on Twitter, everyone's like, oh, it's going to be hype. I'm super excited for Game Awards nominees announcements, only because you want to know how much content you could make around Starfield being there or not being there. Mind you, there was already conversation, right? People have been pre-damage controlling this, already saying, hey, if Starfield was nominated, it's only because it needs to have some Xbox representation, right? Xbox hasn't had a Game of the Year represented game since in 10 years, right? It's been, I believe it's like 10 years, 2012, since the last time Xbox had a game that was represented in the Game of the Year nomination. So a lot of people are already saying, hey, if Starfield was there, it's because they're just trying to help out Xbox, not off the merits that Starfield is a good game, right? We can't say a game like Ghost of Tsushima, which is like an 83 on Metacritic, is severely underrated, deserved Game of the Year nomination, such an amazing game, and also say that Starfield, who's also 83 on Metacritic, is a trash game, it's flop, it's this, that, and the other, because of the Metacritic score, right? Again, a lot of Starfields, if you want to dunk on it, is because it was getting the Game of the Year, Game of the Generation tag. It was. There's no doubt about that. You can go on X or you can go on Twitter and search it up. Game of the Generation. Plenty of videos going on around about it. Then it was almost a lot. People saying it's a lock for Game of the Year. Now just a game. Was it snubbed? I think so. But in the comment section, let me know what games you guys think was snubbed. Do you guys think this was right? Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, Spider-Man 2, Resi 4, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. This is Fame Entertainment from LV1Gaming.com. You guys have a great one. And I'm out.